The Seal, written by Stephen Mina and read by the author. They say London Underground is haunted, not by plague carts or bricked up workers, not even the war dead. What awaits below isn't memory, it isn't even dead, it's something else, something remembering. I used to believe in infrastructure, in order. Then came Holborn, and then the message. Mila's morning always began with a quiet ritual. From her flat near Wood Street Overground, she descended into the grey with her headphones on, camera bag slung over her shoulders like a satchel from some parallel war. She filmed the sky sometimes, clouds rolling in cinematic arcs. She said it made the city look honest. I kind of knew what she meant. As she reached Walthamstow, she stepped down into the Victoria line. She liked the sound the doors made, that deep hydraulic sigh. By Holborn, she'd vanish into a crowd, a ghost of her own choosing. Kenzie lived differently. Hackney Wick, all jagged angles and repurposed warehouses. She scoured the city archives like she was mining for prophecy. Her flat smelled of books, damp maps, and old static. She once told me she trusted concrete more than people. Said it remembered in ways people didn't. I edited and wrote voiceovers for the channel, sat in cafes with too much condensation on the windows, watched strangers and tried to imagine their other selves, the ones they had forgot to become. Urban Roots wasn't big, but it was right. A slow drip channel for the forgotten spaces, decommissioned radar bunkers, ivory cloaked asylum blocks. We didn't chase clicks, we chased ghosts, the kind cities buried in permits and planning notices. Then came the email. No subject, no greeting, just a zip folder, LDN-X9R. Inside, a corrupted overlay of a TFL map. Lines rerouted, a sector marked in deep grey labelled simply, not TFL, not war. One message attached. Farringdon sector, go beneath. This was never meant for transport. A video followed. Grainy, silent, a corridor that I didn't recognise, symbols and a sealed door. One frame looped oddly, a figure frozen and thin. The video jittered, and the email bounced as soon as I replied. The domain unravelled. On a closed historian's forum, the last post from this sender read, "If I disappear, it's beneath Chancery. X9R is real." We met that evening in Kenzie's flat. Rain tapped against the warehouse windows like impatient fingers. The map was up on her screen, layered with other files, archival blueprints and discarded engineering schematics. Occult geometry she insisted was just artifacts of design. "It's bait," Mila said, arms folded, staring at the looped video. "A hoax, maybe, or something testing us." "Testing what?" I said. "Curiosity? Sanity?" Kenzie didn't look away from the screen. "I don't think it's fake. Whoever sent this knew about Farringdon. That sector's been off record since '83. I found one reference. Internal council memo. Coded in euphemisms. Something about infrastructure and repurposing and non-civilian conduits." Mila rubbed her temples. You're chasing ghosts in language, and you're ignoring what's right in front of us. Kenzie tapped the screen, freezing the frame with the symbols. These markings. I've seen similar in Cold War prototypes. Not language, not quite. More like warning. Spatial logic. Spatial logic, I echoed. Maps that think back, Kenzie said. That earned her a look from Mila. This isn't some AI crypt. We don't even know who sent it. Maybe we're not supposed to, I offered. Silence. Then Mila, softly, what if it's from the inside? We paused. Inside what? Kenzie asked. Mila didn't answer. She just rewound the video again. The flicker of the door. The frame glitched. That figure, impossibly thin, forever paused in mid-turn as if listening. Kenzie crossed her arms. You think someone in there sent this? That they have access to the outside? Or, Mila said, maybe it's not about access. Maybe it's a leak. Something trying to get out. Kenzie scoffed. We're anthropomorphizing anomalies now. Mila stood. You saw that figure. You felt the pressure on the audio. Don't pretend you didn't. Pressure doesn't mean intent. It does if it changes behaviour. Kenzie frowned. So you think the message wasn't just a warning? You think it wanted to be found? Maybe it's a kind of beacon. Or a fracture, I spoke. Then it's not just about what's down there. It's about who or what. Kenzie nodded reluctantly. And whoever sent this, it wasn't for public eyes. They knew exactly who to bait. Mila narrowed her eyes. Wait, that historian's forum. You said the sender's last post was about Chancery. Yeah, why? Mila leaned in, voice low. That forum's invite only, and encrypted. You don't get in without credentials. So either the sender was deep in, or someone pretending to be. And if it's the second, Kenzie finished the thought, then someone knows exactly how we work and what we do with bait like this. We looked at each other then, the implications twisting tighter. I still want to go, Mila said. Kenzie nodded. Same. We should have left it there, marked it as a mystery and moved on. But instead I heard myself say, when do we start? Chapter 2. The rain hadn't stopped. It fell in thin, relentless lines that shimmered under the sodium lamps, casting the alley behind Farringdon in a world of rust and reflection. We met just before midnight. No words, just nods and layered jackets. The air smelled like wet stone and old exhaust. The alley was narrower than it should have been, pressed in by the buildings that leaned like eavesdropping strangers. At the far end, behind a row of overfilled bins, the shutter waited, pitted metal, painted decades ago in the shade of municipal green that had long since surrendered to rust. Mila filmed in silence. Kenzie crouched by the lock, hands steady. I still don't like this, Mila muttered, mostly to herself. It feels placed. Everything's placed, Kenzie replied, tools clicking. That's the problem. The lock gave with a soft clunk. Like an exhale, the shutter groaned upward. Inside, silence. A stairwell spiraled down, its concrete steps carpeted in mildew and rat droppings. Shelves lined the walls, half-collapsed archives of city detritus, maps curled with moisture, safety pamphlets turned pulp. I felt it before we saw it, The pressure, the weight of being observed, not by eyes, but by space itself. The way the air thickened around our lungs, sound felt shy. At the lowest level, behind a sheet of warped plaster, we found a false wall. Kenzie ran her palm over it. This was added later. You can see the seams. Whoever did it didn't expect company. She tapped. A hollow ring, then a crack. Behind the crumbling gypsum, a vault door, circular, seamless except for a single hand-sized indentation at its center. No keypad, no handle. We hesitated. Mila raised her camera, filming in infrared. This shouldn't exist. Kenzie touched the indentation. A click, a hiss. The air shifted as the chamber equalized. A long exhalation of time. A seal rolled back with impossible smoothness. A tunnel waited. No signage. No cables. Just a sloping corridor of pale stone and brushed metal angling downward in slow, hungry spiral. We descended. The silence wasn't empty. It was pressurized. Each footstep felt absorbed. Even our breathing faded quicker than it should have. Mila muttered something about low-frequency interference. Kenzie shook her head. No, this place is designed to be quiet. How do you design quiet? I asked. You don't. Not in this way. This is intentional. At the first landing, we passed an alcove with exposed paneling. No wires, just smooth surfaces, etched in faint symbols that shifted under our lights, as if resisting focus. Organic patterns, Mila said, frowning. Almost biological. Kenzie ran her fingers across the grooves. They're not etched. They're grown. We kept moving. The descent went on for what felt like hours, though none of our watches agreed. The geometry began to subtly distort, steps that widened or narrowed unexpectedly, handrails that ended mid-wall. The architecture felt wrong in the way a dream feels wrong. Logical fragments, but disjointed in memory. Then we reached the first landing. A long corridor, dimly lit by recessed strips that hummed with violet light. The air was cooler now, tinged with something metallic. We passed a discarded file cabinet, rusted shut, papers fossilized within it. Kenzie tried to force it open when the cabinet vibrated slightly, like something had shifted inside. No one spoke. Further in, the tunnel forked. The left path led into darkness. The right curved upward. Kenzie pointed. That curve. Those rails. They're wrong. Rails don't rise like that. Not without a terminus. Maybe it is a terminus, Mila offered. But for what? She swept her camera across the walls. In the footage we saw it for the first time. A figure, thin, unnaturally tall, at the curve of the tunnel. Just a flicker in a single frame. Gone before we turned to look. None of us had seen it in real time. Kenzie paused the footage, zoomed in and enhanced frame by frame. The silhouette remained. What the hell is that? Mila whispered. The figure was turned slightly, listening or waiting. My mouth went dry. It was watching us. Kenzie didn't answer. We pressed on, and the tunnel swallowed the sound behind us. Chapter 3. There's a difference between being alone and being unaccompanied. We weren't either. Not anymore. Kenzie kept glancing at her watch, then her phone, then back to the wall. "I think it's counting us," she said. "Counting what?" I asked. She didn't respond. The corridor narrowed. The air was colder here, stale, but not in a way that suggested time. More like preservation, like it wanted us fresh. Myla stopped recording. "Battery's draining too fast." "This isn't normal." "EMP field?" I offered. "No, it's selective. My gimbal's dead, but my mic still works." Kenzie tapped the wall with a penknife. "The interference isn't mechanical. It's structural, like the place is making decisions." The corridor opened into a circular chamber, a single light above, flickering, 6 doors, each identical, no markings, no hinges, seamless. We stood in silence, unsure whether to knock or run. Myla circled slowly. "It's not a junction, it's a holding pattern." "For what?" I asked. Kenzie's voice was thin. "Us." She pointed to the far door, one faintly ajar. Inside, stairs descending. "I thought we were already below ground," Myla muttered. "How far down does this go?" Kenzie flicked through her notes. The memo mentioned non-civilian layers, plural. What if this isn't one structure, but stacked? Like strata? No, like nesting. Myla exhaled hard. "Who builds like that?" Kenzie looked at the walls. "Something that doesn't expect to stop." We took the stairs. The next level wasn't finished, or maybe it had been abandoned. Concrete veins split through metal walls. Unlit corridors bled into each other, looping back like recursive code. We passed doorways that opened into blank walls, passageways that shifted when we turned around. And always that pressure. That sense that space was listening harder than we were. Kenzie stopped suddenly. There. A utility panel, dusty, slightly ajar. She pried it open. Inside, a bundle of wires, not copper, organic looking, tubulars, veined and pulsing faintly. Myla stepped back. "That's not infrastructure." "Maybe it's not meant to be," Kenzie whispered. "Maybe it's growth." My breath hitched. "You think it's alive?" She closed the panel slowly. "I think it's remembering how to be." We heard it again. Footsteps. But wrong. Too even. Too far apart. Myla raised the camera instinctively. The feed stuttered, fuzzed, then went black. Kenzie grabbed my wrist. "This corridor. Turn it off. Turn everything off." We stood in darkness, waiting. The footsteps passed. Not near, not far. Just present. In the dark, Myla whispered, "We're not being followed. We're being led." And I realized then, she was right. Chapter 4. Some rooms were worse. Worse in ways forgotten dreams are worse. Silent, intimate. One was filled with mirrors, but they didn't reflect us. Instead, they showed other versions of space, alternate paths, off-script timelines. In one, Myla stood before a spinning sphere of glass, her face expressionless as symbols pulsed across the surface. In another, Kenzie sat cross-legged in what looked like a Victorian nursery, dust hanging in columns of dead light, her hand resting on a doll's cracked porcelain head. Neither of those things had happened, at least not yet, or maybe they had elsewhere. One corridor doubled back on itself, and a rubberous loop. We passed through it 3 times, each circuit a ceiling light failed. On the 4th, the space was filled with fog from somewhere deep, a lullaby, tinny and distorted. Kenzie collapsed there. I caught her just before she hit the ground. Her pulse raced like something was drumming from inside. Later, she whispered what she felt. Something reached in. Not into me, into what remembers me. We were silent after that. The passage led us onward and downward, always down. Then we reached it. The chamber had no angles, a smooth fluid curve of impossible geometry, like being inside a shell of a thing that never evolved on Earth. The wall shimmered faintly with bioluminescent seams, some curved like spinal arcs, others like veins in glass. Myla named it the Moor. The name stuck, even though none of us had said it aloud. At the centre, a column of suspended fluid, gently rotating. Inside it, a structure floated, crystalline, sharp, like an impossible mineral designed by thought. We circled it. Time thinned. Kenzie took out her last battery-powered recorder, switched it on. The air responded. It wasn't sound, it was feedback. Not electrical, not magnetic, something stranger. The walls tightened, a glyph pulsed along the surface of the central crystal. Then another. They didn't glow, they recognized. Myla leaned close. It's reacting to us. It's cataloguing us, Kenzie murmured, noting proximity. Maybe even intention. That's when it happened. I was reviewing playback on our device, just a loop of our entry into the chamber. Then the screen skipped. For a single frame, a figure, slender, angular, and off. Too tall, limbs slightly wrong, a silhouette that refused the rules of bone. It hadn't been there when we entered, but now, frame by frame, it was turning, aware, listening. Myla backed away from the screen. No. Kenzie stepped beside her, staring. It was watching us before we knew to look. We stopped speaking aloud. Words felt violent, like throwing pebbles at something ancient, submerged. The walls absorbed sound, but didn't forgive, so we moved in silence. And the deeper we went, the more space responded. Not with motion, not with sound, with memory. Things we hadn't said out loud appeared etched faintly in the walls. Phrases, fragments, private things, misremembered places. It was learning us. And worse, it was reciting. We kept walking. Chapter 5. The descent ended. Not walls, no architecture, intent. The chamber was a perfect sphere, vast and smoothed, carved into bedrock with no seams. No tools, no era. A void made deliberate. At its centre hovered the core, a a crystal, violet in hue, suspended above a metallic cradle that didn't touch the floor. It pulsed, not with light, but with awareness, and around it, figures. Dozens at first, then hundreds. Some were dressed in modern workwear, others in clothes decades out of style. One man in early 2000s TFL blues still clutched a notepad mid-scribble. Another was a child in a school uniform, one shoe missing, eyes turned upward, as if the crystal had whispered his name. All frozen in mid-thought. Not corpses, not statues, just paused. Mila went still beside me. Kinsey whispered, "That's..." "I know," Mila said, stepping closer. It was him, a TFL contractor Kinsey had interviewed in 2018 for an abandoned escalator access piece that never aired. He'd gone missing 2 months later. No body, no investigation. His face was unmistakable, eyes half closed, fingers hovering inches from his satchel. The silence in the chamber was total. A kind of pressure, like gravity, but sentient. I felt it behind my teeth. Mila took a step back. "We need to go." Kenzie nodded, but slowly. She wasn't looking at the core anymore. Her eyes scanned the walls, smooth, slightly reflective. Then she froze. "Where's the corridor?" The passage behind us was gone, replaced by polished curvature, as if the room had shifted while we blinked. Mila turned a slow circle. Another exit had formed, new, subtle, sloped like a wound just beginning to close. We ran. The next room was a perfect replica of Mila's flat. Same cracked vinyl on the kitchen chair, same crumbling film posters on the far wall, but outside the window, stars. Constellations that didn't exist. Kenzie backed toward the hallway. "This isn't right." Mila opened a drawer. It squeaked exactly as it should. "We are not in the same place," she whispered. "Not even close." Then something peeled from the wall behind us. Not quite shadow, not quite light. Tall, moving in impossible angles. No sound, no breath. Mila turned toward it. She raised her voice, but the sound never came. No echo, not even silence. Her mouth opened and the space swallowed it. Then she was gone. Not pulled, not dragged, just removed. Erased like an unwanted phrase. Kinsey screamed, but I only saw it. No sound emerged. The walls didn't like noise anymore. They were remembering too hard. We ran again, through the corridors that mimicked logic, but bent intention. One opened onto a long, sterile hallway filled with books, but all their pages were blank. Another turned with every step, spiraling. We didn't stop. We couldn't. And behind us, it came. Not fast, not hunting, just present, watching. Something had invited us. And it was recording now. Chapter 6. Kenzie and I kept moving, blind, wordless. the structure folding behind us like a book closing mid-sentence. The place no longer obeyed sense. One hallway looped back on itself, but the air grew thinner each pass, as if oxygen was being rationed. We found a stairwell that spiraled downward for 10 full minutes, only to emerge from the same level that we'd started from. There were no longer rules, just memories rearranged as obstacles. Kenzie was slowing. Her skin had gone pale as wax, and she moved like someone walking through wet concrete. She wouldn't speak, only looked at me with hollowed out eyes, blinking slowly, like a system on the verge of rebooting. I asked her name. She didn't respond, but she kept walking. The environment fragmented around us. One corridor appeared pixelated at its edges, columns of light and texture failing to resolve. Another was lined with books, each spine labelled in a language that looked almost familiar, like English viewed underwater. When I pulled one down, the pages were blank until I blinked. Then the paper held diagrams, flickering, rearranging, unreadable. We passed a wall of screens. One of them showed us walking, another showed us standing still, a third only Kenzie, alone. Then we reached a glass wall. Behind it, something enormous, breathing. I couldn't see a form, not fully, just a distortion, like a light bent across gravity, a sense of vastness compressed into a chamber too small to contain it. The walls there pulsed in synchrony with it. I felt it in my chest. That's where I think Kenzie began to truly unravel. She pressed her hand to the glass, eyes wide. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Her reflection didn't match her motion. For a moment, barely a second, I saw her reflection step backward while she leaned forward. She recoiled, like she'd been struck and stumbled into me. We kept going. Eventually, my vision narrowed. My legs refused to obey. My breath came in ragged bursts, like air wasn't oxygen anymore. Just the idea of breath. And then, darkness. When I came to, I was outside Chancery Lane Station. Dawn was bleeding through the low clouds. The street silent. A few early commuters passed without glancing at me. My coat torn. My skin tasted of copper, and I was alone. No sign of Kenzie, just her bag beside me, crusted with dirt. Inside, our tapes, every one distorted. File names replaced with glyphs that pulsed faintly, even without power. My watch read 6:44 a.m., but it was 2 weeks later. Kenzie was never seen again. No public record, no inquiry. The blog we shared still listed her name until the next morning. Then it was gone. Like she'd never uploaded anything. Like she'd never been. I went back to the alley behind Farringdon. It was sealed. Not just boarded, erased. No building. No signage. Just pavement. Fresh lines painted with surgical precision. No one remembered the old lot. Mila was never found. Kenzie had vanished. But sometimes late at night, in the edge of mirrors and reflections caught too fast, I still see shapes, tall, angular, still waiting. The tapes remain on my desk, silent, but sometimes when I close my eyes, I hear them. Not sound, Recognition. The structure wasn't a ruin. It was waiting. I've tried to rationalize it, to line up the footage, the timelines, the metadata. I've rebuilt all the files frame by frame, scrubbed spectrograms for hidden voices, layered frequency maps over satellite routes. But the more I look, the more I'm certain whatever we entered wasn't a place. It was a process, a rewriting. Kenzie used to say the city was layered like sediment. Old tracks, lost corridors, buried intentions. But I think it's more like memory. You don't lose the past by covering it. You lose it by remembering wrong. Misplace just enough details, and what you end up with is something close enough to believe until you look too long. And that's what the structure was. A correction. A way of turning attention into architecture. The deeper we went, the less it cared about what was real. It just needed us to observe, to feed it meaning. Myla saw it first, that moment at the spiral, her face. I can still picture it. Not fear, not awe. Something gentler. Recognition. Like she'd already been told how this would end and was finally catching up. Kenzie resisted. She fought it. Even as her body betrayed her, she never let go of the map, never stopped leading, even when her voice went, even when her shadow stopped matching her movement. Some part of her stayed human. I don't know what it wanted, or if want even applies. Maybe it's not a thing in the way we understand. Maybe it's just pressure, a shape that fills voids, a resonance that pulls minds into alignment. But I know this, something is awake beneath the city, and it is patient. Chapter 7. The message arrived on the anniversary, not Myla or Kenzie's disappearance, not the sealed door or the tapes or even the day I woke up outside Chancery Lane. No, it marked the moment we entered, the moment the hatch hissed open and the city stopped being a city. 5 years to the hour. There was no subject line, no sender, no metadata, just a folder in my cloud drive, time-stamped, but without origin. I hadn't logged into the drive in months. I'd almost forgotten it existed. The folder was named Seal Breach. Inside, 17 seconds of video, shot in low resolution, in that familiar monochrome hue we saw when footage corrupted just before something noticed us. It showed the same violet-lit chamber from before, the core, but from a new angle, slightly elevated, as if captured by a mounted camera or something watching from above. The crystal still hovered, still pulsing. The walls were the same, perfect, spherical, unyielding, but at the same time, something floated at the edge of the frame, a figure, still, upright, facing the wall. Even through the distortion, I knew that shape. Kenzie. Her posture was alert, waiting, not trapped, not frozen like the others, aware. Her body shifted slightly at the 9th second, almost imperceptibly. A tilt of the head, a small breath, like she was listening. Behind her, another figure, taller, unclear whether it had limbs or if the suggestion of limbs was just a trick of the light. The frame looped. Kenzie, still listening. The figure behind her, still. And then, at the 12th second, a voice. Not Mila's, not mine, not human. Filtered through static and something older. This time, bring no lens, bring only memory. I stared at the screen for an hour, played it again and again, 17 seconds looping endlessly, like an open mouth mid-sentence. I didn't sleep, I didn't eat, I scoured every digital trace, packet analysis, shadow DNS logs, local catch replays. Nothing. The file didn't come through the net, it came with it, or from within it. It wasn't a message in the traditional sense. It was a pull, a summons, like the first time when the email arrived without a sender, when the forum post vanished, when the door opened for us. It wasn't asking for evidence. It was asking for consent. The lens had been the mistake, the camera, the act of documentation. The structure didn't want to be recorded. It wanted to be understood. And memory? That was the real key. Not tools, not lights, not wiretaps or maps. It wanted remembering to be pure. Kenzie was still down there. Not trapped, not dead, not exactly. And something was holding her shape in place, like a bookmark in a book no one was supposed to read. 17 seconds. This time, bring no lens. Bring only memory. A message, a summons, a test. And this time, I was ready. Interlude. Letter to Mila. Never sent. Mila, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't even know if you're still you, still somewhere, still bound by time in a way that would make this letter reach you before it folds onto itself. But I need to write it, because what we saw that night wasn't just a door. It wasn't just a ruin buried under the city, or a failed broadcast, or some fringe theory that got too close. It was something alive. Something patient. Something that needed us to look at it in a way that it had once looked at us. And I think you knew that. Maybe before the rest of us did. I remember your face when you touched the etching. You didn't flinch. You didn't recoil. You recognized it. Not just as a pattern, but as intention, as memory. You looked like someone who had been called home. Sometimes I wonder if that's what this has been all along. A return, a loop, a re-invitation. I still hear your voice on the audio files, sometimes spliced between frames where your mouth never moved. Sometimes in dreams, saying things I never remember when I wake up, only that they left me cold and grateful. Kenzie's still down there, or something shaped like her. I don't know what that means anymore. Identity's slippery under this kind of pressure. I want you to know I don't blame you. We followed you willingly, because deep down, we all needed to know, not just the truth, but the shape of what the truth becomes when you follow it beyond what it was never meant to reveal. I'm going back. No gear, no lenses, no framing. Just me and this. If you can hear this somehow, If you're anywhere that light still bends and thought still holds form, know that I remember. I remember all of it. And I'm not afraid anymore. Chapter 8. There was no door, not in the way doors usually appear, hinged, bordered, waiting for a decision. Just a soft give of space like the air had folded itself back to let me through. I don't remember stepping forward, but I was inside. The chamber wasn't dark, it simply didn't care about light. It revealed what it chose, impulses, patches of texture, glimpse of embedded metal, the gleam of something slick receding into stone. The hush lived here, not a silence but a hush, like a choir had just finished a note and the air was still catching its breath. The air smelled like wet copper and old books left in a flooded basement. At the centre I saw it, a plinth, low, undisturbed. It looked grown rather than built, as if the floor had chosen to raise itself. Something rested on top. Myla's pendant, the sea glass shard, still wrapped in its wax cord, brass-edged doll, but not decayed. It hadn't gathered dust. It hadn't waited long enough to become relic. It was recent. It was deliberate. I stopped just short of touching it. Every part of me remembered the last time I saw it around her neck, half tucked beneath her collar, as we crawled through the tunnel 4A. She'd smiled then, tight, knowing, distracted. She had already decided something she hadn't told us. The room thrummed faintly, as if acknowledging the memory, and beneath the vibration, a deeper presence stirred. Something not quite voice, not quite pressure, but enough to make my chest tighten. She made herself known. Not words, not a sentence carried through air, but the shape of meaning delivered straight into the bloodstream. It didn't ask for belief. It didn't care whether I understood. It was. I felt my knees weaken. My breath grew tight, shallow. A tremor moved through my left hand, and I couldn't tell if it came from fear or recognition. I looked down at the pendant. It didn't belong to her anymore, and not because she was gone, though she was, in every way that counted, but because what remained here was not a keepsake. It was an exchange. A question rose, uninvited. What had she offered? I turned slowly. The chamber widened the longer I stood in it, like it was unfolding in response to attention. Walls became fluid outlines. The air had weight and direction. Something else waited near the edge of visibility. A figure. Kenzie. Her shape was all wrong. The proportions were close, but softened. Her eyes were wider, more alert than a human could hold without strain. She moved without sound, and the moment she stepped fully into the light, I knew she hadn't just remained down here. She had changed. There was still recognition in her expression, but it was buried beneath something older, something watching through her. She looked at the pendant, not at me. Then she spoke, low and measured, like reciting instructions etched into her marrow. We offer what remembers us. Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence, not from pain, but from effort, like speaking in our language was something her throat had to learn again. I opened my mouth, but no words came. Kenzie stepped closer, almost reverently. She held her hand out, hovering just above the pendant, A tremor passed through her wrist. Whether resistance or hunger, I couldn't say. She went willingly, Kenzie said. Who asked her to? I found my voice hoarse. Kenzie blinked, slowly, as if translating the question through layers of thought. She heard what we were taught to ignore. She turned her gaze fully on me then. It was the same colour, same eyes, but the shape behind them, that was new. I remember who I was, she said. Do you? And the pendant between us wasn't just Mila's, it was mine too. Chapter 9. There was no ceremony, no chant, no light change, no signal that what had once been observation had now become participation. But the chamber knew. As Kenzie's hand hovered over the pendant, the room responded, not with movement, but with acknowledgement. A stillness that grew heavier by the breath, pressing down until even thought became an effort. My throat burned with questions, but I stayed silent. There was something sacred in her presence. Kenzie, but not Kenzie. A vessel, maybe. A channel. Her body holding together something older. Something that reached through her skin like roots pushing through clay. She looked at me. Finally looked. And spoke again. Gentler this time. You came all this way, and you still don't see. I shook my head. I see too much, that's the problem. Her mouth twitched into something like a smile. Then you're close. She stepped aside, motioning towards the plinth. Take it, she said. I didn't move. What happens if I do? Kenzie's expression changed, briefly human, almost pleading. You remember, you become the memory. The pendant seemed to pulse in the dim light, as if responding to our attention. I stepped closer, heart pounding against my ribs like I wanted out. The closer I got, the louder something became. Not sound, not presence. Like a chorus through a veil of hearing, waiting to be let through. My fingers hovered above it. I could feel its weight before I touched it. Then I did, and everything ruptured. Not the world, not the chamber. Me. A sudden, thunderous opening inside my chest. Memory surged, not mine, not entirely, but something collective. Images poured in. Faces I didn't know but loved fiercely. Places I'd never seen but somehow called home. Stone chambers filled with whispering light. A sky that cracked with golden veins. Names spoken in a language older than breath. It was Mila's memory. And not just hers. It was all of us. Anyone who had come before. Anyone who had answered. I staggered back, grasping, hand still clutching the pendant. Kenzie steadied me, her touch. She was cold, but grounding. You've been offered, she said. Now you have to carry. What is it? She paused. A way back. To where? Kenzie tilted her head. That's the wrong question. The chamber began to dim, not with darkness, but with absence. Details receded, the edges of things unravelled. We don't have much time, Kenzie said. Once it knows you, it doesn't wait. For what? To use you. A vibration started in the floor, low, rhythmic, a heartbeat not our own. Kenzie stepped back into the shadow. "You're not done. You're just becoming." Her voice echoed once, then not at all. I turned, pendant still in my palm, suddenly aware of how heavy the air had become. The spiral door behind me was glowing faintly. Not open, not closed, just ready. And I realized this was never about discovery. It was about invitation. It had been calling us from the beginning. Chapter 10. It wasn't light that brought me back. It was gravity. The feeling of a body reasserting itself after too long unanchored. The ache in the bones, the burn in the lungs. My knees hit stone, and breath tore from me like I'd been drowning somewhere deep. I didn't remember falling, or leaving, or choosing to return. But I was here, back in the chamber, alone. Kenzie was gone, the pendant was gone, but the memory wasn't. It lived inside me now, not as a vision, but as a presence. Constant, heavy, not malevolent, but not benign either. It didn't want anything, it was something, a continuity. A witness, a demand to remember. I stumbled. My limbs didn't quite move right, like they were lagging. The spiral door behind me had closed without a sound or warning. I didn't try to open it. Some things, once passed through, don't let you go back. The corridor ahead flickered. I followed it, slowly, uncertain whether the steps I took were in space or memory. The tunnels had shifted, no longer carved with human utilitarianism or passageways. These were older, smoothed by time or something older than time. Each corner bent inward, every path folding gently toward the center, or maybe toward me. Footsteps echoed behind. I turned, expecting her. Kenzie, Mila, anyone, but nothing was there, only me, and yet I wasn't alone. Not really. Not anymore. As I climbed the spiral stairs, I began to hear voices. Not whispers, not hallucinations, but memories, turning in reverse. Mila laughing, Kenzie's theories, my own breath recorded in too many static-laced clips. They surrounded me like ghosts, but kinder, like pages being reassembled in the right order. When I reached the surface, dawn was just beginning to fracture the sky. The gate was still there, the rust still flaked in my palm, but the world felt thinner, not natural, just exposed. As if the surface we call reality was just a thin sheet stretched over a deeper pulse. And now, I could feel it beneath everything. I walked for hours, through London's waking streets, through early trains and coffee queues and children arguing over songs. No one noticed me, or maybe they couldn't. Maybe I had just become part of something else, a carrier, a vessel. But the city welcomed me all the same, or pretended to, and I needed that. Eventually, I returned to my flat. The lights still worked, the kettle still hissed, the news still cycled through the same unreality. I sat down. I wrote this, not as a warning, not as a confession, but as a record of what we found, of what we became, of what still waits beneath us. Not sleeping, not dead, just waiting for the next to listen. Kenzie is part of it now, so is Mila, and so am I. You will be too, if you've made it this far. The seal didn't break, it opened. There's a difference, and the invitation never ends. The end.